So this week I actually got into a small discussion with somebody who's an atheist, and they did this very common trick where they said, this drives me up a wall, where they say, well, I believe in evidence. Okay, so where that comes from is this guy named Sam Harris who wrote this book, and in the book he kind of describes how to try and convert somebody to be an atheist. And he says, what you have to do is first say that you believe in evidence, not mindless belief without evidence. So every time the person uses the word faith, you call faith mindless belief without evidence. And then he goes on, and this is the amazing part, then he goes on to say, actually the word faith in Greek, and technically in Greek, Latin, and Hebrew, the word faith in Greek is pistis, and it means, it's translated better as the word trust. That really what it means is that you trust in a relationship. He says, but you don't want them to use that definition. He says, what you want to do is redefine faith as thinking without evidence, and then mock them for the definition that you just gave them. That is very clever. Do you get how clever that is? You change the definition, then mock the people for the definition that you gave them. And the amazing part is I'd be like, really, if you want to work by evidence, then the evidence is you know what the word faith really means in Greek. And the evidence is you're a liar. No, seriously. You know what the word means, and you purposely lie and twist it to think it means thinking without evidence. Faith is really, in Greek, Hebrew, and Latin, the root word is trust. And it's really trust in a relationship. And anybody who says that they work by evidence and not by faith, without any trust, I actually feel sorry for that person. Because, how do you know they packed your parachute correctly? There's a lot of things in life that really you have to simply trust in the goodness of the other person. Don't put your faith in the wrong type of people. But how do you go through life without trusting in love? How do you have a marriage or a friendship without some sort of trust? And yes, even have trust in God. So it's a very clever argument, but I just mention this because there is a difference between being cynical, a skeptic, versus being jaded. I love St. Thomas. He's in today's gospel. I think he should be the patron saint of skeptics. You really want to think about things and draw things out. I think that's great. To be jaded, to be obtuse and closed-minded about your conclusions, that's actually what I consider Sam Harris. It's possible to go through life by looking both at evidence and being able to trust in relationships. To really see the world, you need both eyes, not one. And I mention this because I have to say, like Thomas, I'm a skeptic. I believe in being skeptic. I really do. I think the problem with the world is that people aren't skeptical enough. I think, like Thomas, if you're skeptical, it'll lead to the presence of Christ. It really will. It's not like Jesus didn't know that Peter could be a coward, or Judas could be selfish, or even Thomas could be incredibly skeptical. I think skepticism leads to God. Being jaded does not. And what I mean by that is that, being skeptical this way, for me, everything in creation speaks about the divine. Or it's kind of like Mary Magdalene when she goes to the garden looking for Christ, and she sees Christ as a gardener. Some people, just by looking at creation, you discover the Creator in creation. I believe that. I'm a skeptic. If I look at creation, I'm going to say every piece of artwork has an artist. If I'm walking on the beach and I see somebody has written a message in the sand that says, I love you, I naturally think, wow, some lover has left a message for their beloved. I don't think that just random probability created the sand that way. Yeah, like, I'm skeptical. Or even creation itself. Like, this one mathematician figured out the likelihood of actually there being life is 10 to the power of 54. That's 10 with 54 zeros after it. I'm so cynical. I have to believe, well, I actually do believe, that all creation speaks about the very nature of the divine. The mathematician who figured out mathematically the probability of life existing put it this way. He said, it's about the same probability that a tornado will hit a junk pile, and just by the movement of all of that, after the tornado would have assembled a 747. I'm so cynical, I believe it has to be. And yes, you can look at evidence and trust at the same time. Look at all the major scientists in history were people of faith. Galileo, yes, he got in a fight with the church, but he didn't give up his faith. He believed in science, evidence, and faith. Kepler, science. He taught in a seminary, science and faith. Einstein, a lot of Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens said that Einstein was an atheist. Einstein was not an atheist. He said he believed in the God of Spinoza, this God of mystery. Einstein called people dogs who say, they use my name and associate with atheism, and he called them dogs. You can be a person of science and also faith as well, of evidence and faith. There's plenty of doctors and nurses who use science but have faith. Or just Thomas's skepticism, where he says, I will not believe it unless I probe the nail marks in his hand and put my hand into his side. He's actually asking a really hard question. And the hard question is this: if you say that Christ is resurrected, then show me where Christ is resurrected in the wounds of the world, in the marks of injustice and cruelty, because that's what the marks of the crucifixion are. And I have to say, I've looked, I've probed those nail marks, and I have found the presence of Christ. My dad, I told you, died of ALS, and believe it or not, that turned out to be an incredible miracle, that somebody could be dying of ALS and be this great presence of God there. My mother was a nurse. She has a lot of stories about that, despite the fact people can have ALS or cancer. They can discover the presence of Christ in it. Or even I've worked in some of the poorest places in the world. And what I discovered in just brutal poverty, not like anything that is in the United States, in brutal poverty, I find love and joy and faith and, yes, even the presence of Christ. That's what it means to probe the nail marks in his hands. You can even find Christ there. And it always strikes me as odd, the ones that want to use the argument that, well, how can Christ exist when there's so much cruelty in the world, are always advocated by those who live in very safe environments, who have never really probed it. Yes, I can even see the presence of Christ risen in cancer and poverty. But most of all, I find it in love, where I find what you should put your faith in, your trust in, is love. As I said, I don't know how anybody makes it through life without trusting love. Sometimes people put their trust in the wrong place, but I think you find the presence of God when you do put your trust in love. And even in other people. Thomas, where does Thomas find the presence of Christ? But in the community. The first Sunday of Easter he skipped, which is really odd. It's odd because he skipped it, because why wasn't he there? If Thomas is making this point about probing the nail marks, the wounds of injustice, why isn't he with the community that truly is wounded? That's where Christ appeared. So they tell him the next weekend he's there, and on Sunday, just like today, Christ appears. But Christ always appears in a community. And if you notice after that, it said he breathed on them and gave him his Spirit, the Holy Spirit. The idea is that where you want to find the presence of Christ is among God's people. That's where Christ has put his Spirit. And so I really do hope people who come to Holy Apostles, I hope they find a people that really do have not only faith in God, but also the presence of Christ is among us. And that part, to me, is a strange part. Like, even it's still in the second reading of the book of Revelation. In the book of Revelation, when John first sees Christ, where does he first see Christ? It says, and you have to think what it means poetically, among the 7 lampstands. And he's writing a letter to the 7 churches where he was a bishop. And he finds Christ standing among the lampstands. So what that means is this. So every church, it's part of the Old Testament Judaism, has a special lamp. That's ours over there. And it's always kept burning in front of the tabernacle, and it symbolizes us in this constantly burning, praying before the presence of God. So every church has a lampstand. You guys knew that, right? Okay, apparently only that side. So when he says he sees the presence of Christ, and he's wearing this ankle-long white robe, that's an alb, and he has a gold sash across his chest. That's either a priest stole or it's a deacon stole. The deacon stole goes sideways because they're a little off. It's not really clear, but where he finds the presence of Christ is among a community. And this is my point, is that yes, I think everybody should work by evidence. Evidence is great. But you can't go through life with just one eye. You go through looking with both eyes. And what you need in life is faith. Faith in love, faith in other people. And what the gospel is saying is, yes, with faith, you can discover the presence of Christ in people, actually even in the wounds of the world, in poverty and cancer. That's where we find the presence of Christ. So going back to the original argument of Sam Harris saying, well, I work by evidence, and calls faith mindless belief without evidence. No. You can work with evidence, but with faith, you can be open to a whole lot more. You learn to trust love, and yes, trust and love, and your eyes will be open to see the presence of the divine all through creation. And so together...